Welcome back to Outlaw Operations, where every story pulls you deeper into the shadows. Tonight, we're unraveling a chilling tale wrapped in lies, greed, and betrayal, a story that started with love and ambition but ended in heartbreak. Before we dive in, I want to send a huge thank you to all our amazing subscribers and everyone watching. Your support means the world. Now, here's a little secret: almost 97% of you are tuning in without hitting subscribe. If you're one of them, why just watch from the sidelines? Join the family, hit that subscribe button and become part of the Outlaw Operations crew. Alright, settle in, this is one story you won't want to miss. Lissy always kept things neat. His shoes aligned just right by the door. His books, if he had any, were always stacked with precision. And when the police walked into the house where 3 people were found dead, it looked wrong. Not like a typical crime scene. No mess. No broken glass. No frantic struggle. In fact, some things looked cleaner than they probably had before the crime. It was too composed. Too deliberate. Almost like someone had tried to convince them nothing had really happened at all. And that's exactly what set off alarms in the investigators' heads. While others would have left the place in chaos, Lissy left it in order. But that order whispered something else: control. Staging. Deception. Suspicion grew, especially when it became clear that Lissy knew the victims. That's when the pieces started to come together. When they brought him in, he wasn't panicked or defensive. He didn't even seem particularly aware of the weight of the situation. He asked for pizza. Then sweets. Then a soda. Like a child trying to make the best of an uncomfortable school detention. He denied everything with the same casual tone he might use to shrug off a rumor. He told his story, stuck to it, and then leaned back like it was someone else's problem. They locked him in a cell. He curled up and went to sleep. The next morning, he strolled out like nothing had happened. Calm. Unbothered. It wasn't innocence, it was detachment. So they shifted focus. If Lissy wasn't going to talk, maybe someone else would. That's when Maria's name came up. She worked with him. A young, attractive woman who had quickly become the object of his obsession. He started drifting away from Catherine, his wife. Emotionally, then physically. His colleagues noticed. Some said he talked about Maria constantly. Others said he was acting strange, distracted, like his mind was somewhere else entirely. But during interrogation, Lissy spoke about Catherine like he still loved her. Like she was the center of his world. It didn't match the reality they were uncovering. The officers watching him didn't just see lies, they saw a man unraveling. But slowly. Quietly. Strategically. So they decided to break him. They told him what his colleagues thought. That no one respected him. That after the death of his wife and child, people started to avoid him altogether. That even Maria, his muse, kept her distance now. The words stung. And finally, the mask slipped. He snapped. In a fury that had been building for years, Lissy exploded. He screamed, cursed, punched the table. And 20 minutes later, it all poured out. The confession. The guilt. The rage. The truth. They had him now. All that was left was to trace back the why. And the trail led to Kazara. Lissy was the firstborn in a cold house. His father, a rigid man, never hid his preference for the younger son. Lissy was invisible unless he did something wrong, and then he was punished. Criticized. Belittled. He learned to keep his head down, his mouth shut. He followed orders. He avoided arguments. It wasn't about peace, it was survival. In school, he was bullied. At home, ignored. He grew up desperate to be liked, to be accepted, to prove he was good enough. But he never confronted anyone. He internalized the pain, wore a mask of politeness, and molded himself into what he thought others wanted. He laughed when others laughed. Felt pain when others cried. He copied their emotions to blend in, like camouflage. Even his appearance mattered. He joined the gym, dressed well, smiled when he wanted to scream. Anything to avoid the sting of rejection. His father forced him into economics. So he went along. No passion. No resistance. Just another decision made for him. He graduated at 21 and landed a consulting job in Milan. Good money. Prestige. But inside, he felt nothing. His life was a blueprint designed by others. He played the part, even excelled at it. But the emptiness followed him everywhere. And then came the pressure. When would he get married? Settle down. Make a family. That's when he met Catherine. She was older, confident, full of energy and ideas. Her life was her own, something Lissy never had. She had dreams, a career, a strong voice. She was everything he admired and feared. Catherine guided him at first, filling in the emotional blanks he carried since childhood. They moved forward quickly. She thought they were building something solid. He followed her lead, letting her carry the weight. But Catherine couldn't be controlled. She was self-sufficient, opinionated, grounded. She didn't need him the way he needed her. And the more she stood tall, the smaller Lissy felt. Not intentionally, Catherine was kind, nurturing, but her independence reminded him of how weak and lost he really was. They lived in a small town, close to her family. Catherine had friends, a successful career in insurance, and a side passion for musicals. She sang on stage. Gave public talks. She lit up rooms. Meanwhile, Lissy stayed in the background, pretending to smile. Then Maria arrived. Younger. More playful. Less established. Maria didn't challenge him, she admired him. She was impressed by his job, his ambition. She gave him the kind of attention he'd always craved but never earned. He became fixated, convinced that she could give him a new life. One where he wasn't living under anyone's shadow. So he made a decision. Catherine had to go. No confrontation. No conversation. Just silence and planning. Because Lissy didn't know how to fight, he only knew how to escape. And when he finally acted, it was with the same detached precision he applied to everything else. He cleaned up. Arranged things neatly. Put on his mask again. But this time, the cracks showed. And once they started pulling at the seams, the whole thing unraveled. Beneath the polished exterior, Lissy was still that overlooked boy from Kazara, wounded, scared, and desperate to be seen. But the only way he could claim control of his life was by taking others away. He crept behind her and drove the knife deep into her neck, believing it would be enough. Catherine would drop, bleed out, and die quietly, just like he planned. But it didn't go that way. She fought. Somehow, with blood pouring down her neck, she got up and stumbled forward, trying to escape. But she didn't get far. A few frantic steps, and he caught up. No hesitation. He plunged the knife into her again and again, into her chest and stomach, until she stopped moving. Until she stopped breathing. Until she was finally still. Then, in that deafening silence, he turned and walked down the hallway, toward the bedroom of their oldest daughter. She lay there peacefully, the door cracked open, completely unaware. The sounds hadn't stirred her. She was still lost in sleep when he entered and leaned over her small body. One swift motion. The blade slid into her neck, and just like that, her world ended before it even had a chance to begin. But he wasn't finished. Their youngest child, barely 20 months old, was next. A toddler with no idea of fear, no sense of danger, and no chance of survival. The boy was asleep too, silent, innocent, dreaming. One more stab, one more life stolen. 3 lives taken in less time than it takes to brew a pot of coffee. Afterwards, Lissy went downstairs, to the bathroom in the basement. Blood still clinging to his skin, he stood beneath the stream of water, washing away what he had done. The warm water that mixed with red and swirled down the drain wasn't just cleaning his body, it was erasing evidence. Or so he thought. He dried off, dressed, but missed something. He put on the same underwear he wore during the murders. A stupid, arrogant mistake. Then came the staging. He tossed the house like a petty thief. Threw objects around, stuffed a knife down the drain to make it look like a break-in gone wrong. All a show. He was laying the groundwork for the story he'd sell to the world. And once the scene looked chaotic enough, Lissy left. Just like that. Not to flee, not to hide, but to hang out with friends and watch a football match. He sat in a room full of people, laughing, reacting to goals, completely detached from what he'd just done. While his wife and children lay dead, their killer was eating snacks and texting her about the game's score, as if she'd ever read those messages. At 2 a.m., he returned home and played the part he'd rehearsed. Parked the car. Changed into his slippers. Walked into the kitchen, and turned on his phone's camera. In the video, he's an actor. He enters the living room, sees Catherine's lifeless body, and starts screaming, staggering backward like a man in shock. He even ran outside, supposedly to find help. But what he didn't do said everything. He didn't check on her. Didn't touch her. Didn't rush upstairs to see if the children were still alive. He knew what he would find, because he had done it. In court, they asked him why. Why not just leave? Why not divorce her, spare the kids, move on? His answer was chilling in its simplicity. Divorce meant child support. Divorce meant splitting assets. Divorce meant complications with his new girlfriend, Maria. In his eyes, the children were burdens, and Catherine an obstacle. Murder, in his twisted logic, was a solution. The evidence was damning. His search history showed it all. He had researched methods, studied cases. This was no spontaneous act of rage. It was planned. Cold, methodical, deliberate. A week before trial, they sent him for a psychological assessment. Maybe, they thought, he didn't fully understand what he'd done. But the experts disagreed. He was sane. Fully aware. Fit to stand trial. He refused a lawyer, saying there was no point in fighting. When the court sentenced him to life in prison, he accepted it without a word. But not long after, he filed an appeal, only to retract it days later. He said the sentence was fair. And maybe, in some twisted way, he was relieved. In prison, he didn't have to pretend. No more decisions, no more responsibilities. Just rules. A routine. Wake up. Eat. Lights out. Nothing to plan, nothing to fight for. Lissy blended into prison life like he belonged there. Guards described him as calm. Inmates said he seemed remorseful. But remorse, in a man like that, is just another performance. It's been 4 years now. 4 years behind bars. His file reads, Model Prisoner. But behind that title is a man who slaughtered his family because it was easier than facing life's difficulties. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment tragedy. It was execution dressed as escape. And that brings us to a very different kind of tragedy, the case of Amber Dubosi. Amber had just turned 14. A December child with a quiet spirit and a deep love for animals. Her parents had split up back in '99, but she still saw her dad regularly. She chose to live with her mom, who had since remarried. Her stepfather, Dave, was more than just the new guy in the house. He called her his daughter, and he meant it. The family, Amber, her mom, Dave, and her little sister Allison, shared a warm, affectionate home. Amber wasn't like most girls her age. She didn't care for lipstick or fashion or flirting with boys. She loved books, devoured them. Writing stories, learning new things, studying ahead of schedule. She was the type of girl who stayed late at school just to ask questions, the kind who made goals and then quietly crushed them. But above all, she loved animals. From spiders to elephants, every living thing fascinated her. Her dream was to become a marine biologist and study animal behavior. She wrote about them in her journal, sketching their movements, describing their personalities. She was still a child, full of wonder, hope, and innocence. And then someone took that away. Catherine had always believed in fairy tales, the kind where love came wrapped in quiet moments, promises, and family. So when she met Lissy, a man who carried himself like he was ready to settle down, her heart leaned in. He wasn't flashy or overly charming, but he said all the right things and looked at her like he saw a future. They started dating, and it wasn't long before things moved fast. They felt right together, like a puzzle clicking into place. She brought him home to meet her parents after just a few months. Her mother had reservations, always the cautious one. Her father stayed quiet, studying Lissy in that way protective dads do. They'd always imagined their daughter with someone a little older, maybe more outgoing. But despite their doubts, they gave her their blessing. Catherine was glowing. She believed she'd found someone solid, someone to build a life with. Lissy's family welcomed Catherine without hesitation. They liked that she was full of life, smart, determined, kind. His father especially seemed relieved that his son had finally found someone who grounded him. As a gesture of support, he gifted the young couple a modest house tucked in the countryside. It wasn't fancy, but it had a warm, lived-in feel. It was the kind of place where dreams were supposed to grow. They got married not long after moving in. Smiles were genuine in the photos, laughter echoing through the walls. Children came soon after, and Catherine embraced motherhood with her whole heart. Lissy, on the surface, played the role of a loving father well enough. But the truth had a way of rotting just beneath the surface. While Catherine stayed home raising their children, Lissy worked far away in Milan. That distance gave him space to create a second life, one with no rules, no guilt. He drifted into affair after affair, charming women with ease, promising nothing but hinting at everything. Whenever one of them began to expect more, talking about futures or families, he vanished, moving on to someone new. He never once told them he was married. Never spoke of his children. He was reckless, shameless even. Friends in Milan knew what he was up to, but no one said a word. They watched as he flirted with coworkers, started relationships like games, and discarded them just as quickly. It was all a performance, and he was too good at it. Back home, Catherine had no idea what was happening behind her back. She had just given birth to their second child in 2009 when everything started to unravel. That year, she discovered the truth: Lissy had been unfaithful for years. The pain cut deep, but she wasn't ready to give up. She fought for her family, tried to hold together the pieces of their life. She believed love could still fix things. But what she didn't know was that Lissy had never truly been committed, not even at the start. A week before their wedding, while she was volunteering at the Red Cross, he went to a strip club for his bachelor party. When a woman showed interest, his friends egged him on. One last wild night, they said. He gave in. The next morning, he confessed, not to clear his conscience, but because he wasn't sure if he wanted to go through with the wedding. He told her he missed being single. Catherine was crushed. She left him, moved back in with her parents. But Lissy came crawling back the next day, full of apologies and sweet words. Against her better judgment, she forgave him. They went ahead with the wedding. She wanted to believe he'd changed. People said he loved his kids, but something always felt off. He played with them, yes, but no one ever saw him show real affection. No hugs. No kisses. Just hollow gestures, like he was checking boxes. At work, a new woman joined the company. Another affair bloomed. But this time, the woman pulled away. She didn't want to break up a family. Especially not one with 2 young children. Lissy was furious. But the truth was, he had never stopped longing for something else, something easier, freer. And when his desires didn't align with reality, something inside him snapped. He started thinking dark thoughts. Talking about divorce felt like weakness. He couldn't face Catherine, not after everything. He knew she'd fight for the kids. She'd beg him to stay. And deep down, he knew he wouldn't have the spine to walk away. So he started searching. Quietly. Methodically. First, for divorce lawyers. Then, other things. Articles about knife wounds. Stories of break-ins and unsolved stabbings. One story in particular, about a robbery in their own neighborhood, planted a seed. What if he staged something? What if no one knew? June 14, 2014. He woke up with murder on his mind. It had been a week of browsing, planning, pretending. But now, the plan was in motion. He spent the day like a devoted husband. They took the kids shopping, smiled at strangers, acted like a normal family. Even Catherine didn't suspect a thing. That evening, she cooked dinner. They ate together. Laughed, maybe even kissed. Then Lissy said he was heading to a friend's house to watch the Italy vs. England football match. It was the perfect cover, everyone would be distracted, the streets empty, the noise masking whatever happened inside their house. Before leaving, they put the children to bed. Catherine stayed up in the living room, curled on the couch watching TV. Lissy walked into the kitchen in just his underwear. No rush. No hesitation. He picked the largest knife from the drawer. Then he walked back. Catherine looked up and smiled. She had no idea. And what happened next shattered the illusion of a perfect family forever. The story of Amber's disappearance had quickly grown into something bigger than anyone could have imagined. Her face was on every newspaper, every TV screen, and soon, strangers were showing up at police stations, offering to help however they could. Groups of volunteers combed through the woods, searched under bridges, and knocked on doors, hoping for a miracle. The community was desperate for answers. And when the FBI got involved, it felt like a turning point. They started by focusing on the usual suspects, people with violent criminal records, especially those with past sex offenses. More than 500 people were interviewed. Hopes were high at first, but each lead turned into a dead end. Not a single person had seen anything. The investigation felt like chasing shadows. Amber's house became a second crime scene. Investigators sprayed luminol, searching for hidden blood stains. Nothing. Not a trace. No sign of a struggle, no signs of forced entry. She had simply vanished. Surveillance footage from her usual route was collected and reviewed for hours on end. Some cameras caught glimpses of her, just walking, calm, alone, but none captured the moment she disappeared. Just like that, she was gone. As the days turned into weeks, then months, the silence became louder. Everyone wanted to know, where was Amber? There was one name that kept coming up, Dave. He wasn't a stranger. He was her stepfather. From the very beginning, something about his story didn't sit right. He told the police he hadn't gone to work that Friday. Odd, considering he was always punctual. Instead, he claimed he went to a personal training session, came back home for a while, and left again. His timeline was shaky, his details inconsistent. His wife, Amber's mother, remembered something else, something off. That day, Dave had shown up at her job with chocolate-covered strawberries, a Valentine's Day surprise. It was strange. Romantic gestures weren't his thing. Not before, not ever. And when he got home later that day, he didn't even check the answering machine, another break from his routine. He seemed distracted. Distant. The family itself had always seemed close. Loving. Supportive. But Dave and Amber? There was tension. He thought she was pulling away from the family, spending too much time on school, clubs, and her own space. She was a teenager trying to carve out her identity, and he didn't like that. Still, suspicion alone wasn't enough. The police brought him in. They asked him to remove his shirt, searching for scratches. There were none. Then came the polygraphs. Not just one. 8 of them. And he passed every single test. No red flags. No smoking gun. Eventually, they had no choice but to rule him out. But not everyone was convinced. Amber's mother couldn't silence the fear clawing at her chest. Even after the investigation had cleared Dave, doubt lingered in her mind. The uncertainty broke her. One day, she packed her bags, took her younger daughter Allison, and left. She was afraid for Allison, afraid of Dave, afraid of never knowing what had happened. She took time off work. Watched over Allison like a hawk. Her world had collapsed, and all she could do was cling to what she had left. Her hope that Amber was still alive burned dim, nearly snuffed out, but it was there. Flickering. Grief pushed her into desperation. She considered everything, hiring a private investigator, using scent-tracking dogs, even turning to psychics. Anything that might bring her daughter back. And then, a stranger told her they'd seen Amber in Mexico. Without hesitation, she packed up and went. Flyers in hand, she wandered the streets, asking questions, showing pictures, hoping someone might recognize her child. Amber's biological father, Morris, was on his own quest. He gave up his job, emptied his savings, and searched tirelessly. It was wearing him down, but he wouldn't stop. Not while there was still a sliver of hope. Amber's disappearance struck a nerve nationwide. The media covered every detail. Movies were made. Articles published. But still, no real answers. Just more tips, more dead ends, more frustration. Then, something happened. February 25, 2010. Just 12 days after Amber's family held a fundraising event at a local high school, where they tearfully announced there had been no new leads, another girl vanished. Her name was Chelsea King. 17. Bright. Athletic. Driven. She had dreams of college and a future in science. She loved animals and adored her younger brother, Tyler. That morning, she went for a run at Burn Ranch Park in San Diego. It was just a regular training run. She never came home. Her parents tried calling. No answer. Messages went ignored. That wasn't like Chelsea at all. Panic set in quickly. The family contacted police and rushed to the park. Her car was still in the lot. Her phone was inside, ringing. But Chelsea was gone. Volunteers, police, friends, they all joined the search. In a wooded area not far from the parking lot, they found her socks and underwear. Dumped like garbage. The worst fear began to take shape in everyone's mind. Another abduction. Another girl. And maybe worse. And for Amber's parents, it hit especially hard. There hadn't been a single trace of Amber, until now. A pattern was beginning to form. 2 girls. Same area. Same age range. Similar circumstances. Was there a predator still out there, hiding in plain sight? The entire community braced itself. And somewhere in the midst of all this chaos, Amber's family felt that old, familiar dread rising once again. Right after the news broke, Amber's parents didn't hesitate. They packed up and rushed straight to the park where Chelsea had vanished. They weren't just there out of sympathy, they felt an unshakable connection to Chelsea's family, bound by the same kind of pain they had experienced themselves. For them, this wasn't just another case, it was a continuation of something deeply personal. They believed both disappearances were connected, and if someone was targeting young girls, then standing on the sidelines wasn't an option. They needed to do something. As the sun dipped below the hills, the search intensified. Specially trained dogs were brought in, their noses low to the ground, sniffing out a trail that led toward Lake Hodges, a quiet place nestled near the park. It wasn't long before more clues surfaced: Chelsea's sports top, and then just one sneaker, left abandoned as if in a rush, as if something interrupted her route. While the team scoured the lake area, the police pulled out older files, looking for patterns, something that might link Chelsea's case to others. They didn't have to dig too far back. Just a few months earlier, in late December 2009, another young woman had been attacked near that very area. Her name was Candace Manale, a 22-year-old with a strong routine, same jogging route, same time of day. But on December 22, something went terribly wrong. Out of nowhere, a man lunged at her, throwing her to the ground. His hands were rough and full of rage, and it didn't take long for Candace to understand exactly what he intended to do. She screamed, fought, elbowed him hard in the nose. His howl of pain gave her the seconds she needed to scramble away. Shaking, breathless, she managed to call the police. Her report painted a picture: a fair-skinned man, early to mid-20s, strong build, dark hair. But that was it. No name. No clear identity. Her attacker vanished into the shadows, and the case stalled. Until now. When Chelsea's clothes were analyzed, they revealed something chilling. 2 sets of DNA. One, expected, Chelsea's. The other didn't belong to her. That second profile was run through the system, and what came back was a name that would twist everyone's stomach: John Albert Gardner. He wasn't a stranger to the law. He had a long history of violence, the kind of person you'd expect to be behind bars, but somehow, he wasn't. Gardner lived just miles away, near Bernard's Ranch. When the police found him on February 28, 2010, he was 31. He didn't resist. But he didn't talk either. The moment he was arrested, he asked for a lawyer and clammed up, forcing investigators to chase shadows without answers. Still, there was hope that Chelsea might still be alive. They dove deep into Gardner's past, pulling apart his life to figure out where he could have taken her. What emerged was a life riddled with instability and violence. He was born in California in 1979 and moved constantly as a child. His father battled alcoholism and was abusive. Gardner later revealed a darker secret: he had been sexually abused by a female relative, though he never named her. He said it wasn't his mother. His mother later confirmed he had been plagued with mental health issues since childhood. He was in and out of psychiatric clinics, pumped full of medications, none of which seemed to work. Diagnosed with bipolar disorder and attention deficit syndrome, his mood swung like a pendulum. At times he was calm, almost charming. But that never lasted. Years before Chelsea's disappearance, another incident hinted at who he really was. Gardner had invited a neighbor over, promising a casual movie night. Instead, she found herself trapped in a nightmare, beaten and attacked in his home. She survived. She got away. She spoke up. Gardner was arrested and sentenced to 6 years behind bars. But psychiatrists at the time warned, this man was dangerous. He wouldn't stop. Despite those warnings, Gardner only served 4 years. He was released on parole. What followed was a string of violations. Missed check-ins. Ignored restrictions. And no one did anything. The system, it seemed, had looked away just long enough for tragedy to strike again. One crucial oversight nearly let him off the hook. After Candace's attack, she had gone home for Christmas and wasn't around to be interviewed. When she finally returned, detectives brought her a photo lineup. 6 faces. One of them was Gardner. She didn't hesitate, she picked him out immediately. Despite the mounting evidence, Gardner and his legal team denied involvement in Chelsea's disappearance. But his DNA on her underwear said otherwise. Still, getting him to talk was like speaking to a wall. He sat silently for hours, staring blankly ahead. Then, suddenly, he'd erupt, screaming, laughing without reason, disconnected from reality. But then, in the middle of an otherwise silent interrogation, Gardner asked a question. One question that changed everything. "Have you found the other one yet?" The room froze. No one had mentioned another victim. Not yet. But Gardner just had. The detectives' minds flashed instantly to Amber, 14 years old, missing without a trace. Up until that moment, they hadn't officially linked him to her case. But now, he'd done it for them. The chilling puzzle pieces started to fall into place. Gardner had lived near Amber's home when she disappeared. And now, for the first time, police knew they were no longer searching for just Chelsea's abductor. They were hunting a predator who had been hiding in plain sight for years, slipping through cracks, getting second chances, and taking lives. She had always been a quiet, determined girl, the kind who didn't just dream, she planned. Amber's eyes lit up when she spoke about the school program Farmers of the Future. It was a chance to own and raise a farm animal, a responsibility she welcomed with an eager heart. More than anything, she wanted a lamb. She had already chosen the name, Lynette. It wasn't just a name, it was a bond waiting to begin. Her mother and stepfather lived modestly, stretching every dollar, but Amber pleaded with them to help her. They hesitated at first. $200 wasn't a small amount for them. But Amber, in her thoughtful and mature way, promised she'd take full responsibility. Her mother, ever the cautious type, asked her to write down a plan, something to show she understood the commitment. Amber didn't just scribble down a few points. She wrote a 2-page letter, carefully laying out how she would care for Lynette, what she would learn, and how she'd grow from the experience. It wasn't just convincing. It was heartfelt. That letter changed everything. Her parents gave her the money. They believed in her. And Amber waited for Friday, February 13, 2009, like it was Christmas morning. That was the day she'd finally meet Lynette. That morning, she packed her school bag as usual, but this time, she added a special piece of paper, the receipt for her lamb. It was drizzling lightly outside as she stepped out and began her usual 10-minute walk to school, the same path she had taken for years. But that Friday, Amber never came home. At first, her stepfather, Dave, didn't panic. He thought maybe she had gone ahead to the farm to meet the lamb. Maybe she lost track of time, caught up in the excitement. He wandered around the neighborhood, calling out her name. Nothing. Still thinking it was a small mix-up, he called the farmer. The answer was instant and chilling, Amber hadn't come by. That's when the sinking feeling began to grow in his chest. He called his wife. Her voice cracked with worry as she tried to call Amber. No answer. Over and over, straight to voicemail. She told Dave to check the school and the 4-H club. He drove, fast, to the club. No one had seen Amber. He rushed to the high school. Maybe she stayed late to work on her project. Maybe. But when he found her teacher, the ground dropped beneath his feet. Amber hadn't been to school at all. They called the police. The image of Amber, her face calm and focused, flashed across the minds of everyone who knew her. She was not the kind of girl who would skip school. She was driven, even more so since she had decided to graduate early. Every step she took was calculated. Her mother broke down over the phone with the police, pleading with them to begin the search immediately. Officers arrived at the home, taking in every detail. Amber's room was undisturbed. All her belongings were there, untouched. No signs of her preparing to leave. No missing clothes. No packed bag. Her savings were still in the drawer. The investigators listened closely as her parents described her, a homebody, someone who kept to herself, who had no history of rebellion, no boyfriend, no circle of bad influence. Her world revolved around school, home, and animals. The police traced her daily route, from her doorstep to the school gates. That simple stretch of road became the center of their focus. Had someone intercepted her? Lured her? Taken her? Her classmates could offer no leads. Amber was polite, kind, but distant. She didn't hang out after school. She didn't attend parties. She had no secret friends. The investigators dug into her digital life, combing through her browser history and chat logs. Nothing. No strange messages. No suspicious websites. Just animal care tips and school research. So the police turned to the public. Flyers were printed. Amber's photo was posted on poles, in windows, on community boards. One by one, witnesses came forward. A girl matching Amber's description was seen that morning walking alone. One woman, a family friend, remembered seeing her walking and speaking to a boy she didn't recognize. He had dark skin and a round face. The woman didn't stop, she assumed Amber knew him. But no one else recognized the boy. And Amber's friends, few as they were, had never heard of anyone fitting that description. Desperate to follow even the faintest of trails, bloodhounds were brought in. They followed her scent from the school route, past the town's edge, and all the way to a remote stretch of land near the Paula Indian Reservation. That was where the trail went cold. Her mother clutched at her heart. They had never been to that place. Amber wouldn't go there alone. Someone brought her there. Someone who didn't want her found. The town felt smaller that day. The normal hum of life slowed, caught in the weight of unanswered questions. A good girl had vanished. No enemies. No vices. Just a young dreamer, excited to meet her lamb. And now, just silence. The timeline he gave just didn't add up. He said he took the kids to a neighbor before killing his wife and then called for help, but the truth was his wife had been dead for hours before that. Not only that, but he somehow managed to bandage his own hands quickly and perfectly, something that seemed impossible given the circumstances. The inconsistencies piled up. Yet, his defense lawyer insisted the murder was self-defense. According to the lawyer, Rachel, his wife, had attacked him first, grabbing scissors and lunging at him. They said it was a desperate fight for survival, a brutal struggle where he had no choice but to defend himself. The jury wrestled with the conflicting stories for 13 long days, sifting through every detail, every testimony, before finally deciding. They found 47-year-old Todd Winkler guilty of first-degree murder. In December 2014, he was sentenced to 26 years in prison, with a chance at parole in 2031, when he would be 64. Todd's appeals were all denied, but he did manage to secure better living conditions behind bars. Today, he serves his sentence in San Quentin State Prison, California. This case draws you in, twists you around, and leaves you questioning what really happened that night. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's story unfolds in a small Italian town, a place you might imagine as peaceful, untouched by crime, but as you'll soon see, appearances can be deceiving. The story of the Lissi family takes place in Mata Visconti, a quiet village nestled between Milan and Pavilla, with just 6,000 residents. It's the kind of place where families move to escape the chaos of big cities, hoping to raise their children in safety. Crime here was rare, almost unheard of, until that fateful night. June 14, 2014. Around 2 a.m., a local man burst into the street, screaming for help. He was frantic, desperate, barely able to form words as he reached a neighbor. Through his panic, he explained that his home had been attacked, his family killed, and somehow, he had escaped. But in his shock, he couldn't call emergency services himself. The neighbors took the phone and made the call instead. When help arrived, the horror was clear. Lissi's wife, Catherine, lay dead. His 2 children, a 5-year-old daughter and a 1.5-year-old son, were lifeless upstairs. Lissi, only 31 at the time, had been watching a football match with friends earlier that evening. Everything had seemed normal when he left, but the scene awaiting him was anything but. The dispatcher asked him to check on his family, to help if he could, but Lissy refused to touch the bodies. To the emergency operator, his behavior was understandable: panicked, crying, screaming, rambling, all typical reactions for someone who just experienced such trauma. Emergency crews arrived first, then the police. Around 4 a.m. forensic teams began their grim work. At first, authorities suspected a robbery. A gang had attacked another family nearby a year before, stabbing them and disappearing without a trace. But this theory quickly fell apart. There were no signs of forced entry, no theft, no disturbance of valuables, even a wallet full of money was left untouched. The house was too clean, suspiciously so. There were hardly any bloodstains one would expect after such violence. It looked as if the place had been meticulously cleaned, wiping away evidence. Naturally, suspicion turned toward Lissy himself. Statistics often point to those closest to the victims as the culprits, and in this case, Lissy had fresh, deep cuts on his hands that he couldn't explain. The bodies of his wife and children were cold, meaning they had been dead for hours before he left to meet his friends. His story and the facts didn't line up. The police noticed his strange behavior. Lissy struggled to express grief. He couldn't cry, no matter how much he tried. Instead, he appeared anxious and uneasy, darting his eyes around nervously. Even though his entire family had been brutally murdered, he seemed detached, almost indifferent. This lack of emotion fueled the detective's suspicions. During questioning, Lissy's fear became palpable. He paced the room, scratched his hands obsessively, banged on furniture. It could have been stress, or something more sinister. Medical staff treated his wounds, and when he was asked to strip for further examination, police found drops of blood on his lower back, blood that didn't match his clean clothes. Neighbors recalled hearing strange noises and a woman's screams around 11 p.m., just before Lissy left the house. But the sound stopped quickly, and no one thought to call the police. That hesitation proved tragic. The children didn't die immediately. They bled out slowly over hours, time during which their lives could possibly have been saved. The scene inside the Lissy home was unlike any typical robbery or break-in. The house was eerily spotless in places it shouldn't have been, the timeline was suspicious, and Lissy's behavior unnerved investigators. It was a puzzle that challenged everything the police thought they knew. In the end, the question loomed: was Lissy the victim, or the perpetrator? The truth was tangled in shadows, and the answers lay buried beneath the blood and silence of that tragic night. It was a quiet night when the children were ushered into the neighbor's home. Todd had told them everything was fine, that their mother needed rest after an argument. Meanwhile, inside their house, Rachel's lifeless body lay still. Hours passed, and he sat beside her as if waiting for something, perhaps the right moment, or maybe the courage to pull off his story. What haunted detectives later was the same question that echoed in everyone's minds: why didn't Rachel run when she had the chance? Why didn't she escape? At precisely 10:30 p.m., Todd took the kids to the neighbor's house. Moments later, he picked up the phone and dialed 911, delivering his version of events with unsettling calmness. But the medical examiner's timeline unraveled everything. Rachel had been dead for 6 hours by then. Whatever Todd told the dispatcher, it didn't align with the brutal truth. Rachel's autopsy read like a crime scene painted in agony. Broken ribs, deep abrasions, punctures, and cuts riddled her face and neck. The fatal wound, a deep gash to her jugular vein, left no time for rescue. She bled out in minutes. Defensive wounds covered her arms and body. Rachel had fought back. But her strength wasn't enough to stop what was coming. She hadn't been drunk. Only trace amounts of alcohol were found in her blood. There was no haze of intoxication to explain her vulnerability. Just pure violence. When investigators started digging into Todd's past, they stumbled upon another tragedy cloaked in suspicion: the death of his second wife, Catherine. Initially labeled a freak car accident, the case had gone cold for over a decade. But Rachel's murder brought everything back to the surface. It was time to look again. Back in 1999, Catherine and Todd had gone hiking with their kids in a forested area. Todd claimed he'd been stung by a bee and began experiencing a severe allergic reaction. In a panic, Catherine drove them in their pickup, Todd lying in the back seat while she rushed toward the nearest hospital. According to him, she lost control of the vehicle, sending it tumbling down a mountain slope. Catherine died in the crash. Todd survived. Tourists nearby heard the crash and rushed to help. They found Todd climbing the steep slope, dressed in heavy winter gear despite the heat. He said the adrenaline cleared his allergic reaction. When emergency crews arrived, they couldn't even access the wreck immediately. The terrain was too steep, the fire too intense. Catherine's body was burned beyond recognition. Yet Todd had no scratches. Not one bruise. He told police his winter clothing shielded him. Claimed he'd been thrown from the vehicle. Couldn't remember where the bee stung him. Doctors found no bite marks at all. His story was riddled with gaps and stitched together with implausibility. But without solid evidence, the death was ruled accidental. Todd collected more than $1 million from her life insurance and cut all ties with Catherine's family. To them, he was a man escaping the scene of a staged tragedy. When Rachel died, those suspicions caught fire. To Catherine's relatives, it was no coincidence, just a new victim in the same pattern of deceit. By October 2012, Todd Winkler stood trial for Rachel's murder. His stories shifted with each interrogation, just as they had after Catherine's death. What prosecutors pieced together was chilling. Todd had meticulously planned Rachel's murder. It wasn't rage, nor passion, it was strategy. Don Hatfield, Rachel's father, gained custody of her child. For him, it was a bitter chance to right the wrongs of the past. He was convinced Todd hadn't killed Rachel because of her affair or their upcoming divorce. It was because she knew something buried in his past, and had threatened to expose it. Rachel had lived in fear. Her brother once saw Todd physically assault her at a bar in San Diego, years before her death. She told her loved ones if anything ever happened to her, it would be because of Todd. He scared her. She wasn't paranoid, she was perceptive. Her eldest daughter recalled a moment that sent shivers down her spine. One day, Rachel discovered a box hidden in the closet, ashes. Catherine's ashes. She joked, nervously, that she hoped she wouldn't end up like that. Todd's reply: "Then don't make me angry." That comment etched itself into the family's memory. There were other incidents. Rachel once shared a harrowing experience during a scuba diving trip in Florida. Todd allegedly abandoned her in open water, leaving her to panic and struggle alone. On another occasion, he reportedly tried to push her off a motorcycle. These events were shared in whispers, in texts to friends. Rachel had a habit of embellishing things, but when you looked at the pattern, it painted a disturbing portrait of a man whose charm masked cruelty. Psychiatrists diagnosed Todd with dissociative and conversion disorders, conditions that can fracture perception and emotional responses. But when evaluated for trial, he was deemed sane and responsible. His attempts to manipulate the court using mental illness backfired. One day, he even faked psychosis in front of the judge. The act didn't work. The prosecution laid out the sequence like clockwork. Todd waited until Rachel was asleep. He crept in with scissors and attacked. The struggle was fierce. Then, for 6 long hours, he orchestrated the scene. He inflicted wounds on himself, bandaged them, cleaned up, fed his children, took them to a neighbor. Only then, with everything in place, did he call 911. There were blood stains on the kids' breakfast plates, an eerie sign that Todd prepared their meal just moments after murdering their mother. He admitted it later, in a chilling confession. Rachel had trusted him once. Loved him. Forgiven him for things she should have run from. But love doesn't shield you from a monster when he decides you've outlived your usefulness. In the end, Todd Winkler wasn't just a grieving husband or an unlucky widower. He was a man who thought he could rewrite reality. But blood tells its own story. It didn't matter that she had no proof, Rachel was determined to be heard. She claimed her third pregnancy wasn't out of love, but the result of rape. That word alone sparked something fiery in James, her lover. He didn't just believe her, he was enraged by it. He wanted to protect her, even if he didn't know exactly how. In October 2011, Rachel spent a weekend with her old university friends. To them, she poured out her exhaustion and fear, her words trembling with frustration. Todd, her husband, had stopped supporting her financially. She'd been borrowing just to afford diapers and food for the children. The roof over their heads. Falling apart. But Todd wasn't interested in fixing anything, not the house, not the marriage. She said he was controlling her life, dictating everything from the money to her body. She never wanted a third child, but Todd had insisted, pushed, and coerced. And now she was stuck in a crumbling home with 3 kids and a man she no longer recognized. She told her friends she felt trapped, lost in a marriage that had turned into a daily struggle for survival. One of those friends, a lawyer, gave her advice, on separation, on protecting herself legally, on how to manage the family's finances if she chose to walk away. Rachel began planning. She wasn't after revenge. She just wanted fairness. A peaceful divorce. A way to secure a stable life for her children. But Todd had other plans. He didn't want a divorce. Not now. Not ever. By November, Rachel stopped paying the mortgage. Todd wasn't giving her any money, and what little income he had was now a mystery. He was hiding it, tucking it away somewhere she couldn't find. She began to feel paranoid. Was he planning something? Something worse? On November 11th, she called her lawyer friend. She said she was ready to file. Todd was in Amsterdam at the time, a business trip conveniently followed by a vacation. While he was away, Rachel began filling out the divorce papers. She told James that Todd had found digital copies of the documents on her laptop and deleted them. So this time, she did it by hand. By February 2012, Todd knew. He didn't want the divorce, and he wasn't going to sit back quietly. He started telling people that Rachel was unstable. He went to her father, Don, and said she was drinking too much, smoking, losing weight rapidly. Don, who saw his daughter regularly, didn't believe any of it. Rachel said the weight loss was from stress. What else would you expect from someone going through a toxic divorce? The tension at home was now a ticking time bomb. Todd's business partner noticed something was off. He said Todd was falling apart, sinking into a depression. Todd insisted the problem wasn't him, it was Rachel. He even talked about having her committed to a psychiatric facility. Claimed she was spiraling, on a drunken binge, and he needed space. That conversation happened on February 10th. The divorce proceedings were set to begin on February 26th. Rachel had counted on alimony. She was planning to move in with James, hoping to start over and give her children a new life. But that night, she never made it to his place. By the next morning, February 27th, everything had changed. A neighbor saw Todd with the children. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, just a father with his kids. Around 10:30 a.m., Todd showed up at the same neighbor's door, asked them to watch the children. He said something terrible had happened at home. He was calm. No blood, no bruises. Just irritated. Like he was annoyed with how the day was going. Then, Todd dialed 911. He told the dispatcher that his wife, Rachel, was dead. Killed during a domestic dispute. Police arrived minutes later. Todd walked out to meet them and repeated the same words, "My wife is dead." He didn't ask for a lawyer. He didn't try to run. Instead, he sat down with detectives and started talking. He said Rachel had been cheating for a long time. That she filed for divorce and wanted full custody. He told them he lost his temper. That it escalated fast. He said their child started crying during the fight, so he stopped and moved the kids to another room. But the argument didn't end. It picked up again when he came back. Rachel hit him. He said he tried to apologize, but then she grabbed scissors and slashed at his hands. He said he had no choice but to defend himself. He jabbed her in the eye to disarm her, then rushed out to grab the kids again. But the moment he returned, she kicked him in the face. And that's when he lost it. He threw her to the floor and strangled her. She grabbed the scissors again, but he took them, struck her with them, once, then again, then again. She begged him not to kill her. Promised to fix everything, to save their marriage. But he was too far gone. He admitted to stabbing her in the neck. Said he didn't mean to kill her, but also admitted he wanted her dead in that moment. When it was over, he tried to clean up the mess. Washed the blood. Tried to revive her. But it was too late. Rachel was gone. The story he told didn't add up. The cuts on his hands weren't consistent with his claims. His injuries were minimal. Detectives didn't buy his version. There were too many holes, too many convenient details. Why take the children away if you thought your wife was just drunk? Why calmly wait for the police if this had been an accident? Todd insisted it was a tragic mistake. A fight gone wrong. But to everyone else, his friends, the neighbors, the detectives, it felt like something else entirely. A desperate man watching his world crumble, who decided if he couldn't have control over Rachel's life, he'd take her death instead. He sat in silence, surrounded by the crumbling pieces of a life shaped by pride and unforgiving decisions. A man once too stubborn to bend, now humbled by the weight of regret. He had walked away from his wife, his children, convinced he was right. But now, watching the chaos unfold in his daughter's life, he understood. He should have forgiven. Should have stayed. But the past, cruel as it is, offers no return. With no way to fix his own mistakes, he turned to his daughter, Rachel. He begged her to think twice about her affair with James, a man whose presence was slowly unraveling the very fabric of her family. She listened quietly, eyes clouded with emotion, and promised she would think it through. But love, especially the reckless kind, rarely listens to reason. Rachel, despite her father's pleas and her husband Todd's broken heart, continued to see James. She whispered secrets to her friends, admitting that James had captured her heart in a way she didn't expect. Meanwhile, Todd, aware his marriage was on the verge of collapse, turned to Rachel's father, Don. He confided in him, sought his wisdom, hoping to salvage what was left. Don urged him to fight. To forgive. To hold on. Eventually, Rachel started to feel the cracks herself. The thrill of the affair began to fade, leaving behind a harsh truth: this wasn't sustainable. She wasn't just a lover in hiding, she was a mother and a wife. Her children needed stability. Her unborn baby needed a family. So she turned back. She apologized. And Todd, with a heart more forgiving than most, took her back. They tried. For their children, for themselves. And for a while, it worked. They even shared good news: Rachel was pregnant again. It was their third child, and though Todd quietly wished for a son to carry on the family name and the business, he accepted that fate had given them another daughter. His wife was content, and they seemed happy. In March 2011, they went on a vacation to Florida, leaving the children with Dawn. They laughed again, shared quiet moments, rekindled something that had long felt lost. Rachel swore the baby she was carrying was Todd's, and Todd believed her, at least, he wanted to. But beneath the surface of their smiling family portraits, the fractures remained. Arguments erupted behind closed doors. Resentment simmered in silence. After the vacation, things grew tense again. Todd flew to Australia for business. He stayed longer than expected, invited Dawn to join him, but not his wife or children. He claimed the trip would be too long, too hard for Rachel, especially pregnant. But it felt like something more. In Australia, Todd and Dawn relaxed, sharing beers and old stories. Back home, Rachel was alone. She found herself reaching out to her first love, Tim, a quiet, thoughtful artist who still held a candle for her. She told him stories of her chaotic life, about the debts Todd left her with, about a plane bought in her name. Tim listened, torn between pain and hope. He still loved her. And she knew it. Rachel, tired of being just a wife and mother, returned to work at the airport. Her father disapproved. He believed a woman's place was at home, especially one who didn't need the money. But Rachel wanted more. She needed to feel alive again. Dawn reluctantly gave in, sensing he was losing influence over her choices. James, now running a business near the airport, reappeared in Rachel's life. Dawn warned her to stay away from him, seeing what others couldn't, or wouldn't, admit. But temptation lingered. James had been divorced twice, and though he claimed he didn't want to ruin another marriage, his feelings for Rachel hadn't faded. Then came the call. Early June 2010, Rachel confessed to James that she was still in love with him. She said she couldn't go on living with Todd. James, married himself, was caught off guard. But love makes fools of us all. They began meeting again, in secret. With Todd away so often, it wasn't hard to hide. James even started bonding with her children. But secrets have a way of surfacing. Their behavior, once discreet, grew sloppy. Neighbors talked. Whispers became rumors. James finally broke. He confessed to his wife, told her he loved Rachel. His wife, furious and betrayed, went straight to Todd. Todd's world shattered. He confronted Rachel, begged her to think of their children. She promised to end it. But it was a lie. The affair continued, just more carefully. And in July 2011, Rachel gave birth to a baby boy, Alex. Though Alex wasn't James's child, he loved Rachel so deeply he was ready to raise her children, dreamt of a life with her. Todd, suspicious and heartbroken, discovered the truth. Rachel was still seeing James. He was devastated. And this time, Don didn't defend his daughter. He stood by Todd. Don suggested a final act of peace, a conversation between the two men. So Todd and Don drove to James's home. When they arrived, James and his daughter had just returned from target practice. The scene was oddly domestic. Normal. Todd, tired but calm, spoke first. He reminded James that he and Rachel were still married. That they had children. That he loved her. He asked James to stay away. James nodded, gave a respectful answer. But his eyes told another story. He wasn't letting go. Not yet. Not ever. Rachel had painted Todd as a monster, controlling, cruel. And James believed her. Together, they were planning an escape. A new life. A fresh start. But behind every love triangle lies a ticking clock. And this one, already wounded and weary, was counting down to something far darker than anyone expected. The tension in Rachel's life had been brewing long before she ever knew what real heartbreak was. Growing up, the weight of a fractured home clung to her like a second skin. Her mother's resentment for her father bled into the hearts of the children, turning them cold and distant. Custody was lost to the bitterness of words and wounds that hadn't healed, and her siblings rarely visited their father anymore. But Rachel, she carried it all. The separation tore through her like glass under the skin, and the quiet war between her parents left scars no one could see. By the time she hit her teens, the emotional pressure crushed her. Rachel's weight plummeted to a dangerous 30 kilograms. She stopped eating. Stopped caring. She ended up in a psychiatric clinic in Modesto where the walls whispered stories like hers, stories of girls lost in the chaos of their own minds. But Rachel didn't fade away. Against the odds, she clawed her way back. Treatment worked. Her body recovered, and eventually, so did her spirit. She took up sports. She ran like she was chasing freedom. And in her healing, something beautiful happened. She found her way back to her father, Don. He welcomed her with quiet pride. She was his only daughter, and his muse. A gifted soul. In school, Rachel's brilliance stood out. She excelled in every subject, her mind sharp, focused. She seemed unstoppable. Don, a renowned painter, watched his daughter grow into a woman shaped by pain but carved from resilience. Rachel decided to follow in his footsteps, not with a brush, but with ambition. At university, she pursued business and marketing and stunned her professors with her command over mathematics. She graduated with distinction and accepted a high-paying job. Life, for the first time, seemed steady. But love complicates even the most carefully drawn plans. She met Tim back in high school. They were both artists, kindred spirits with empty pockets and shared dreams. They moved in together after graduation, chasing inspiration and scraping by. When the commissions dried up, they painted murals and frescoes to make ends meet. It worked. They slowly built a name, a home. Rachel kept supporting him even after her corporate success. They were together for 14 years. Everyone believed they'd grow old side by side, marriage, children, everything. But Rachel's clock started ticking louder as she approached 30. She wanted to be a mother. Tim, always the dreamer, wanted to wait, get stable, buy a house, build a foundation. Rachel wasn't interested in waiting anymore. The harmony they'd nurtured cracked, arguments replacing affection. By July 2005, they were barely holding on. That's when Todd Winkler entered her life. At a dinner party filled with laughter and clinking glasses, she met a man who seemed to have everything Tim didn't. Todd was 8 years older, a former Air Force fighter pilot turned tech entrepreneur. He was successful, charming, rich. Owned a plane. Owned a mansion. Twice married, once divorced, once widowed. His second wife had died in a tragic car accident back in '99. But he wasn't bitter. Todd was searching for love again, and when he saw Rachel, he believed he'd found it. Rachel was swept up in it. The promises. The pace. Within weeks, she broke it off with Tim. After 14 years, it ended with a whisper, not a bang. Todd proposed quickly, lavishly, and she said yes. Her family was surprised, but she was glowing. They married that same summer, and Rachel took his last name. Winkler. It felt like the beginning of something golden. She buried the memories of her old life, the struggles with Tim, the murals, the small apartments. This was luxury. Stability. A future laid out like a red carpet. A year into the marriage, Rachel gave birth to their first daughter, Eva, and she fell in love all over again. Motherhood lit something inside her. Their second daughter, Ariel, was born just a year later. Rachel stayed home, raising their children, tending the house. Todd worked, first in tech, then as a manager for a major pharmaceutical firm. They lived in a neighborhood so elite that personal jets had their own garages. But dreams, even golden ones, fade. By 2010, Todd's job moved him 2 hours away. He was gone more, working late. Rachel, growing restless, took a job managing operations at the nearby airport. It gave her purpose. A taste of independence again. That's where she met James White, a contractor who came in for repairs. Their first conversations were casual. But casual can turn into comfort, and comfort can become dangerous. Todd noticed. Rachel wasn't smiling the same way. Not at him, anyway. She spent more time talking to James than to her husband. The warmth had faded, and in its place, Todd found suspicion. He confided in Don, Rachel's father. Don didn't like what he was hearing. To him, this sounded too familiar. Too much like the past he'd lived and regretted. Don had once let an affair ruin his own marriage. It left his family shattered. He couldn't let his daughter repeat his mistake. He sat Rachel down, looked her in the eyes, and pleaded with her, not with judgment, but with the desperation of someone who knew where this path ended. He told her he regretted divorcing Diana. That if he could go back, he'd fight harder. That she didn't have to make the same mistake. But life isn't that simple. Emotions don't vanish with a conversation. And secrets don't stay buried forever. The beautiful wedding, the mansion, the children, the glittering future, it all started to unravel. Whispers turned into arguments. Trust turned into doubt. The same woman who had once escaped a broken home now stood at the center of another collapsing one. And what happened next would make even the most tragic of family stories feel tame. Because this wasn't just a tale of lost love. It was about to become a crime story no one would forget.